Again, ladies and gentlemen, for our daily Bible study of the legends of the Jews brought to you by the strange cow from another planet, world, in his reading room, with the help and aid of our old pal, Louis Ginsberg, the editor who brought together the legends of the Jews. Today, on our thrilling episode, the next episode of the section of the chapter of the thing of chapter 4, Noah, the birth of Noah, the punishment of the fallen angels, the generation of the deluge, the holy book, the inmates of the ark, the flood, Noah leaves the ark, the curse of drunkenness. Noah's descendants spread abroad the depravity of mankind. Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, brought to you today for the sake of your edification, because you know you're never going to read this stuff otherwise, you naughty person, and so you'll never be privy to the history of the world and the knowledge imparted unto man, etc., etc. So here we go, beginning Noah, the birth of Noah. Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech, and she bore him a man child. The body of the babe was white as snow, and as red as a blooming rose, and the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes like the rays of the sun. When he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very full of light. And when he was taken from the hand of the midwife, he opened his mouth and praised the Lord of righteousness. His father Lamech was afraid of him and fled. And came to his own father Methuselah. And he said to him, I have begotten a strange son. He is not like a human being, but resembles the children of the angels of heaven. And his nature is different, and he is not like us. And his eyes are the rays of the sun, and his countenance is glorious. And it seems to me he is not sprung from me, but from the angels. And I fear that in his days a wonder may be brought on the earth. And now, my father, I am here to petition thee and implore thee that thou mayest go to Enoch our father and learn from him the truth, for his dwelling place is among the angels. And when Methuselah heard the words of his son he went to Enoch, to the ends of the earth, and he cried aloud, and Enoch heard his voice, and appeared before him, and asked him the reason of his coming. Methuselah told him the cause of his anxiety, and requested him to make the truth known to him. Enoch answered and said, The Lord will do a new thing in the earth. There will come a great destruction on the earth, and a deluge for 1 year. The son who is born unto thee will be left on the earth, and his 3 children will be saved with him, when all mankind that are on the earth shall die. And there will be a great punishment on the earth, and the earth will be cleansed from all the impurity. And now make known to thy son Lamech that he who was born is in truth his son, and call his name Noah. For he will be left to you, and he and his children will be saved from the destruction which will come upon the earth. When Methuselah had heard the words of his father, who showed him all the secret things, he returned home and called the child Noah, for he would cause the earth to rejoice in compensation for all destruction. By the name Noah he was called only by his grandfather Methuselah. His father and all others called him Menahem. His generation was addicted to sorcery, and Methuselah apprehended that his grandson might be bewitched if his true name were known, wherefore he kept it a secret. Menahem, comforter, suited him well as Noah. It indicated that he would be a consoler, if but the evil doers of his time would repent of their misdeeds. At his very birth it was felt that he would bring consolation and deliverance. When the Lord said to Adam, "Cursed is the ground for thy sake," he asked, "For how long a time?" And was and the answer made by God was, "Until a man child shall be born, whose conformation is such that the rite of circumcision need not be practiced upon him." This was fulfilled in Noah. He was circumcised from his mother's womb. That sounded kind of strange. Noah had scarcely come to the world when a marked change was noticeable. Since the curse brought upon the earth by the sin of Adam, it happened that wheat being sown, yet oats would sprout and grow. This ceased with the appearance of Noah. The earth bore the products planted in it, and it was Noah who, when he was grown to manhood, invented the plow, the scythe, the hoe, the scythe, the scythe, the hoe, and the hoe, and other implements for cultivating the ground. Before him, men had worked the land with their bare hands. There was another token to indicate that the child was born unto Lamech was appointed for an extraordinary destiny. When God created Adam, he gave him dominion over all things. The cow obeyed the plowman, and the furrow was willing to be drawn. But after the fall of Adam, all things rebelled against him. The cow refused obedience to the plowman, and also the furrow was refractory. Noah was born, and all returned to its state preceding the fall of man. Before the birth of Noah, the sea was in the habit of transgressing its bounds twice daily, morning and evening, and flooding the land up to the graves. After his birth, it kept within its confines, and the famine that afflicted the world in the time of Lamech, the second of the 10 great famines appointed to come upon it, ceased its ravages with the birth of Noah. The punishment of the fallen angels. Grown to manhood, Noah followed in the ways of his grandfather Methuselah, while all other men of the time rose up against this pious king. So far from observing his precepts, they pursued the evil inclination of their hearts and perpetrated all sorts of abominable deeds. Chiefly the fallen angels and their giant posterity caused the depravity of mankind. The blood spilled by the giants cried unto heaven from the ground, and the 4 archangels accused the fallen angels and their sons before God, whereupon he gave the following orders to them. Uriel was sent to Noah to announce to him that the earth would be destroyed by flood, and to teach him how to save his own life. Raphael was told to put the fallen angel Azazel into chains, cast him into a pit of sharp and pointed stones in the desert Dudael. You better know your Duda well if you're gonna go to Dudael, and cover him with darkness. And so was he to remain until the great day of judgment, when he would be thrown into the fiery pit of hell, and the earth would be healed of the corruption he had contrived upon it. Gabriel was charged to proceed against the bastards and the reprobates, the sons of the angels begotten with the daughters of men, and plunge them into deadly conflicts with one another. Shemhazai's ilk were handed over to Michael, who first caused them to witness the death of their children in their bloody combat with each other, and then he bound them and pinned them under the hills of the earth, where they will remain for 70 generations until the day of judgment, to be carried thence to the fiery pit of hell. The fall of Azazel and Shemhazai came about in this way. When the generation of the deluge began to practice idolatry, God was deeply grieved. The 2 angels, Shemhazai and Azazel, arose and said, O Lord of the world, it has happened, that which we foretold at the creation of the world and of man, saying, What is man that thou art mindful of him? And God said, And what will become of the world now without man? Whereupon the angels, We will occupy ourselves with it. Then said God, I am well aware of it, and I know that if you inhabit the earth, the evil inclination will overpower you, and you will be more iniquitous than ever men. The angels pleaded, Grant us but permission to dwell among men, and thou shalt see how we will sanctify thy name. God yielded to their wish, saying, Descend, and sojourn among men. When the angels came to earth and beheld the daughters of men in all their grace and beauty, they could not restrain their passion. Shemhazai saw a maiden named Istahar, and he lost his heart to her. She promised to surrender herself to him if first he taught her the ineffable name by means of which he raised himself to heaven. He assented to her condition, but once she knew it, she pronounced the name and herself ascended to heaven without fulfilling her promise to the angel. Ha! God said, because she kept herself aloof from sin, we will place her among the seven stars that men may never forget her. And she was put in the constellation of the Pleiades. Shemhazai and Azazel, however, were not deterred from entering into alliances with the daughters of men, and to the first two sons were born. Azazel began to devise the finery and ornaments by means of which women allure men. Thereupon God sent Metatron to tell Shemhazai that he had resolved to destroy the world and bring on a deluge. The fallen angel began to weep and grieve over the fate of the world and the fate of his two sons. If the world went under, what would they have to eat? They, who needed daily 1,000 camels, 1,000 horses, and 1,000 steer, hungry. These two sons of Shemhazai, Hewa and Hiya by name, dreamed the dreams. The one saw a great stone which covered the earth, and the earth was marked all over with lines upon lines of writing. An angel came with a knife, obliterated all the lines, leaving but 4 letters upon the stone. The other son saw a large pleasure grove, planted with all sorts of trees, but angels approached bearing axes, and they felled the trees, sparing a single one with 3 of its branches. When Hiwa and Hiya awoke, they repaired to their father, who interpreted the dreams for them, saying, God will bring a deluge, and none will escape with his life, excepting only Noah and his sons. When they heard this, the two began to cry and scream, but their father consoled them. Soft, soft, do not grieve. As often as men cut or haul stones or launch vessels, they shall invoke your names. Hiwa, Hiya. This prophecy soothed them. Shemhazai then did penance. He suspended himself between heaven and earth, and in this position of a penitent sinner he hangs to this day. But Azazel persisted obdurately in his sin of leading mankind astray by means of sensual allurements. For his reason, for this reason, 2 he-goats were sacrificed in the temple on the Day of Atonement, the one for God, that he pardon the sins of Israel, the other for Azazel, that he bear the sins of Israel. Unlike Istahar, the pious maiden Naamah, the lovely sister of Tubal-Cain, led the angels astray with her beauty, and from her union with Shamdan sprang the devil Asmodeus. She was as shameless as all the other descendants of Cain, and as prone to bestial indulgences. Cainite women and Cainite men alike were in the habit of walking abroad naked, and they gave themselves up to every conceivable manner of lewd practices. Of such were the women whose beauty and sensual charms tempted the angels from the path of virtue. The angels, on the other hand, no sooner had they rebelled against God and descended to earth than they lost their transcendental qualities and were invested with sublunary bodies, so that a union with the daughters of men became possible. The offspring of these alliances between the angels and the Canaanite women were the giants, known for their strength and their sinfulness. As their very name, the Emim, indicates, they inspired fear. They have many other names. Sometimes they go by the name Rephaim, because one glance at them made one's heart grow weak, or by the name Gibborim, simply giants, because their size was so enormous that their thigh measured 18 ells, or by the name of Zamzumim, because they were great masters in war, or by the name Anakim, because, like the snake, they could judge the qualities of the soil, or finally by the name Nephilim, because bringing the world to its fall, they themselves fail. Ah! Next, the generation of the deluge. While the descendants of Cain resembled their father in sinfulness and depravity, the descendants of Seth led a pious, well-regulated life, and the difference between the conduct of the two stocks was reflected in their habitations. The family of Seth was settled upon the mountains in the vicinity of Paradise, while the family of Cain resided in the field of Damascus, the spot whereon Abel was slain by Cain. Unfortunately, at the time of Methuselah, following the death of Adam, the family of Seth became corrupted after the manner of the Cainites. The two strains united with each other to execute all kinds of iniquitous deeds. The result of the marriages between them were the Nephilim, whose sins brought the deluge upon the world. In their arrogance, they claimed the same pedigree as the posterity of Seth, and they compared themselves with princes and men of noble descent. The wantonness of this generation was in a measure due to the ideal conditions under which mankind lived before the flood. They knew neither toil nor care, and as a consequence of their extraordinary prosperity, they grew insolent. In their arrogance, they rose up against God. A single sowing bore a harvest sufficient for the needs of 40 years, and by means of magic arts, they can compel the very sun and moon to stand ready to do their service. The raising of children gave them no trouble. They were born after a few days' pregnancy, and immediately after birth they could walk and talk. They themselves aided the mother in severing the navel string. Not even demons could do them harm. Once a newborn babe, running to fetch a light whereby his mother might cut the navel string, met the chief of the demons, and a combat ensued between the two. Suddenly the crowing of a cock was heard, and the demon made off, crying out to the child, "Go and report unto thy mother. If it had not been for the crowing of the cock, I had killed thee." Whereupon the child retorted, "Go and report unto thy mother. If it had not been for my uncut navel string, I had killed thee." Wise guy. It was their carefree life that gave them space and leisure for their infamies. For a time, God in his long suffering kindness passed by the iniquities of men, but his forbearance ceased when once they began to lead unchaste lives. For God is patient with all sins, save only an immoral life. The other sin that hastened the end of the iniquitous generation was their rapacity. So cunningly were their depredations planned that the law could not touch them. If a countryman brought a basket of vegetables to market, they would edge up to it one after the other and abstract a bit, each itself of petty value. But in a little while the dealer would have none left to sell. Even after God had resolved upon the destruction of the sinners, he still permitted his mercy to prevail, and then he sent Noah unto them, who exhorted them for 120 years to amend their ways, always holding the flood over them as a threat. As for them, they but derided him. When they saw him occupying himself with the building of the ark, they asked, "Wherefore this ark?" Noah, "God will bring a flood upon you." The sinners, "What sort of flood? If he sends a fire flood, against that we know how to protect ourselves. It is a flood of waters, then the waters bubble up from the earth. We will cover them with iron rods. And if they descend from above, we know a remedy against that too." Noah, "The waters will ooze out from under your feet, and you will not be able to ward them off." Partly, they persisted in their obduracy of heart, because Noah had made known to them that the flood would not descend so long as the pious Methuselah sojourned among them. The period of 120 years, which God had appointed as the term of their probation, having expired, Methuselah died. But out of regard for the memory of this pious man, God gave them another week's respite, the week of mourning for him. During this time of grace, the laws of nature were suspended. The sun rose in the west and set in the east. To the sinners God gave the dainties that await man in the future world, for the purpose of showing them what they were forfeiting. But all this proved unavailing, and Methuselah and the other pious men of the generation having departed this life, God brought the deluge upon the earth. Tune in again next time for the next exciting chapter in the continuing saga of the Reading Cow from another world and a bedtime story for the baby to relax and go to sleep when we will read the next section of the chapter of the Legends of the Jews of Louis Ginsburg, uh, the Holy Book. Until that time, ladies and gentlemen, goodbye.